Hi everyone, I'm Susan Mulvihill. Welcome back to my vegetable garden. Today I'm sharing with you my top tips for success in growing vegetables. So let's get right to it. I tell you what, mulch is the way to go. If you want to keep the moisture in your soil and you want to cut down on the amount of weeding you have to do, and who doesn't, then you definitely want to put mulch around the plants in your garden. I'm using grass clippings from a lawn that has not been treated with weed and feed or other herbicides, but you could also use shredded leaves or straw, anything along those lines. But no matter what you use, it's definitely worth the effort. While we're on the subject of mulch, use it to protect the potatoes growing near the surface of the soil in your potato bed. That prevents them from turning green, which is caused by the sun hitting developing potatoes. The green is a natural substance called solanine, which is considered harmful to eat. In my bed, I'm using a combination of shredded leaves and grass clippings. Try plastic mulches for heat-loving crops like tomatoes, melons, cucumbers, winter squash, eggplants, and peppers. They really heat up the soil, which is just what those plants need. Plus, they conserve soil moisture, and again, they cut down on your weeding, which is great. Remember that a watering system needs to go underneath the sheet of plastic in order for the water to most easily reach the plants. Since we cover some of our beds with floating row cover or bird netting, we made hoops from flexible black plastic sprinkler pipe. Ours go into PVC uprights on the outsides of the beds, but you can easily push them into the soil. This pipe is very economical and easy to work with. This is floating row cover. It is a lightweight woven fabric that you put on hoops or some other support over your bed, and it lets in air, light, and moisture. So if it rains, the water will go through. But it has a couple of extra benefits that I love. One is that early in the season and late in the season, when you need a few degrees of protection from frost, this will provide that. The other thing is that floating row cover is often used by organic farmers when they're growing a crop that is susceptible to certain types of insect problems. And so it acts as a physical barrier that keeps those insects from getting to the crops, which I think is very cool. You can find it online in all kinds of widths and lengths, and you can also find it at large, well-stocked garden centers. My next tip also involves the use of floating row cover. What I do is for the first 2 weeks that my warm season crops are out in the garden, I keep them covered with this, and that way it really keeps a warm environment around them and gets them off to a great start. After those 2 weeks, I remove the floating row cover, and that way when the plants start blooming, the pollinators can get to those flowers and work their magic. Here's another idea for a cover for your beds when you're growing cabbage family crops like broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, and so on. The fabric you're seeing on those hoops is called tulle, T-U-L-L-E. It is bridal veil fabric, and you can easily find it at fabric stores. It's very inexpensive. What I like about it is that it allows for good air circulation because it's just a netting basically. And so cabbage family crops are a cool season crop, and that means that they really don't like a lot of heat. If I were to use a floating row cover on this bed, I think it might keep the bed a little bit too warm. So I really like that. It also acts as a physical barrier to keep the cabbage butterflies from laying their eggs on the leaves. And we all know those eggs will hatch into green inchworms, and they make the leaves look like Swiss cheese. So you don't want that. But the thing I really like about the tulle is that I can easily see through it to keep an eye on the plants and see how they're doing. This next tip is going to look a little odd, but it is so cool and it's so simple, and it's free. If you have a lot of birds in your garden like I do, and you think they're going to want to nibble on freshly sprouted seeds, here's what you do. You take a bunch of branch clippings that you have left over from pruning, everybody has those, right? And you lay them across the planted area or sticking up out of the bed, and the branches act as a physical barrier to keep the birds away from your seedlings. If you look closely, you will see that I have some small bean seedlings coming up. They're doing fine so far, and I'm going to leave the branches in place until they're a few inches tall. Then they'll be able to fend for themselves. So I'll remove the branches and no one will be the wiser. So I want to reassure you immediately that this is a fake snake, so don't be scared. But if you have a lot of problems with birds, and I know I sound like I have a love-hate relationship with them, but if you need to keep them away from some young seedlings, this is another option. You can find them at dollar stores, so they're very inexpensive, and you can just put them here and there just to make birds kind of think twice about going into a bed and nibbling on a seedling. If you're growing root crops like carrots and parsnips, it's important to thin them at this stage in order to get good root development later. Now you're probably noticing I have bird netting on this bed, and that's one more way to protect seedlings from birds. At this point I can take the netting off, and now it will be time for me to thin them so that they are about 3 inches apart, and that will be enough room to allow these carrots to get a nice root. My next tip is so easy but so important, and that is to monitor your garden on a regular basis. That way you find the little problems and nip them in the bud before they become big problems. And it's so easy to do, it's actually very pleasant. Just take a wander through your garden, take a look and see how things are doing. My last tip is to suggest that you avoid using chemicals anywhere in or around the garden. You know, nature is a balance, and when we use chemicals, it throws off that balance, and we often end up with more problems than we started out with. In my garden, I often find that if a small problem crops up, it is taken care of naturally before I even have to do anything. I've been gardening organically for years, and if you have any questions about doing that, please don't hesitate to email me at susan@susansinthegarden.com. In the meantime, I'll see you next week, and happy gardening.